Hey, everybody, super excited for this chat with a true industry insider and guru when it comes to SMB marketing from Constant Contact. Dave, how are you?
Great to see you, Evan. I'm doing fantastic. We were just chatting a little bit of heat here in the Boston area today, which is nice.
Yeah, special Boston edition. Summer has arrived. It's our time to thrive, but the work continues, especially for SMB folks like myself. So I'm really excited to have this chat and pick your brain on all things small business marketing. Before that, maybe introduce yourself. Many have heard of Constant Contact, but how would you describe the company these days? You have so much going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my name is Dave Charest, Director of Small Business Success at Constant Contact. I also host the Be a Marketer podcast. Former role, Constant Contact, I was Director of Content Marketing as well. Yeah, Constant Contact, been around for this year. We're celebrating our 30 years in business and started with email. And of course, at this point, it's really an AI-powered platform that provides tools designed specifically for small businesses. And I would say, I often am saying, small business owners first, marketers by necessity, right? And so these are folks that don't necessarily have a marketing degree. They know they need to do it. It's a necessary evil in many cases. And so we want to make sure the tools are something that they can use and put to good use and, automate much of what they can. And now, of course, with AI kind of layered on top of that, it gives them the ability to really get back to the things they'd rather be doing versus spending all day doing the marketing where, folks like you and I may enjoy that, but many others enjoy doing the work that they have to do with their business instead, right?
Totally. And so much to unpack at Constant Contact, but we'll come back to that. Let's talk big picture, sort of state of the union in marketing.
Mm,
What's working right now? What's not working best for small business marketing? You've got so many channels. You've got email, you've got social, you've got
yeah.
messaging, you've got AI tools. But given all that noise, what's really moving the needle in your opinion?
Yeah, I think what we see, and I think this is true at any stage of the game, right? Even, I've been at Constant Contact for 13 years, doing this a little bit before that as well. And, I think at the end of the day, it really all comes back to people. And I think there's always a new shiny thing to chase. And I think for me, it's always about just the folks that focus on the foundations are the folks that really earn the right, I like to say in many instances, to go play and try the other things, right? Because at that point, you've got things working, you're generating revenue, right? You're doing something for your business and you're not just chasing, right? So you've got a strong foundation with which to build upon. And so, the things we've heard, I've been fortunate to talk with a lot of small businesses over the years. And, some of the key things that keep coming to the forefront, and I think this is just valuable stuff to think about is, one is really, building real community relationships. I think, Constant Contact was founded on this idea of, build relationships with your existing customers so you can keep yourself top of mind and they'll come back to you and spend more money with you, right? And I think it's the same today, just we have more channels with which to do that, right? And so, time and time again, we hear from folks, the folks that actually are having the face-to-face things. And I think this is something that becomes even more and more important, particularly now in the world of AI. I think AI is going to do a really great job of kind of helping us with the things we don't want to do. And, it may turn into a world of AI speaking to each other, but then people actually getting together and having real experiences with each other. That's my hope for what we do. But I think it's going to shift that way because that's going to end up being the differentiating factor in a lot of this, right? Where everybody's using AI, everybody's got this thing, but it's the experiences with people that we can't necessarily replicate, right? Or we crave more as human beings. And so I think that's always important. We also see the folks that approach this with that learning mindset or, setting themselves up in a really smart way, right? Because it is that. I think you have to approach marketing. I always look at this with the marketing lens and marketing, we talk about this idea of best practices. And I kind of argue that, the best practice for one business could be the exact opposite for another business. And so it really is about thinking through what are your best practices, right? Like I like to offer things to people with the idea that, look, if you don't know where to start, I'm going to give you a place, right? Here's how to think about it. And here's where your benchmarks may be, but know that you're just doing that so you can find out what your benchmark is. And then you
Mm.
figure out what is going to be the best thing for you, right? And so I think you've got to really adopt that mindset of learning and testing and knowing there's not like an answer. The only real answer is it depends, right? And it depends on what it is that you're trying to do. And then how are you going to use the tools available to you to help you reach that goal, right? And we've all got access to the same things, but how we use them really changes there. I think the other thing that we're seeing with folks that's working right now is really looking for those ways to actually adopt the automation to save time. A lot of times small businesses shy away from automation in some ways because they'll feel like it's a little bit too impersonal in many ways, and they've got those tight connections with the people in their local communities and those types of things. But I kind of push back on that and argue that actually automation allows you to be more timely and relevant. And that's what I think you really mean by, personalization, because the automation is often triggered by someone, taking an action, raising their hand, like investigating something and looking for something. And the more you can do to hit them with the information they need when they want it, well, what's more personal than that, right? And so it's not a cold thing. Like, you should still be, sending your messages and thinking about communicating as if you're speaking to one person, except now you're just able to deliver that in a very timely and relevant time frame, right? That gets to people when they need it. The other thing I would say, and kind of two more things on my list here, right? I think the other is really that segmentation. I think it continues to show itself. I think that's always the number one way. If people are like, how can I get better results from what I'm doing? And I'm like, well, what are you doing from a segmentation standpoint, right? Because when you start to think about that, you start to then, you can get more personalized with the information that you're sharing because you're speaking to a specific group of people. And, I think what's interesting is as we move into the future is how we start to look at that from a less of a, all right, group of people perspective, but more on a one-on-one perspective, right? Because I think AI is going to unlock a lot of that as we look into the future of what's possible by, taking into account things like, predictive analytics and those types of things. And so you can really build I want to say like an ICP of like an actual customer, right? You can have data on that specific customer to know what to say and when to say it based on things they're doing, right? And then the last thing I think is really just making sure that as you're doing all of this stuff, and this kind of goes back to the learning and testing idea, but checking on, okay, what's really working. I think it's really easy to get into this habit of like, let's just keep doing the things that we're doing, but not actually saying, well, is this thing worth spending my time on? And, I think all of us know that the last thing that we have is more time to waste on something. And I think it's really not being too precious and saying, you know what, after you've given, I think you have to give something time. I'm often a big believer of like, all right, say 6 to 12 months, I'm going to commit to something. And then if you're not moving in the directions you want to be moving, maybe it's time to try something else or move on, right? But I think those are really like the themes that I'm hearing from the successful business owners that we're talking to on a regular basis. Like those 5 things are kind of continually come to the surface.
That's fantastic. So many takeaways, and you work with so many customers that you have a great bird's eye view on SMB marketing. You also do a lot of first party research. I was looking at the state of SMB marketing on your
Yeah.
website. What were some of the surprises, maybe takeaways or anecdotes from that piece of research that's right available on the website?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a surprise as much as it is a confirmation. And
Mm.
I do a presentation and I include this in there to really set up why it's so important to even be having this conversation, right? It's just about marketing in general and what it can do for your business. 56% of the people that we spoke to in terms of the state of marketing, they have an hour or less to spend on marketing.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, there's so many things to do. I mean, as a business owner yourself, right? I'm sure you recognize that, you signed up to do one thing and then you found out, oh, I've got to do these 20 other things as well, right? To keep it going. And so, finding the time to do those things are important. The other piece that I would say this one is probably the most disturbing in many ways, like 73% feel iffy about their marketing strategy. And so they're doing things, but they're not really confident that they're doing the right things or things that are going to move the needle. But they're doing something, right? And I think, I often say social media is very good at this, right? It makes you feel like you're doing something, right? And you're
I'm
getting
doing something
information.
all day. Yeah,
Right,
absolutely. Yeah.
exactly. And like, okay, cool. And you're getting the dopamine hits and all of those things, but doesn't always equal, money in the bank account. And so, and then the other piece, and I think these all kind of fall together in many ways, 52% procrastinate on their marketing.
Mm.
And I think it's a combination of those, right? Being uncertain and not having a lot of time. And I often joke that, all right, well, if you've got a choice between taking out the trash and doing some marketing, most people are going to pick taking out the trash because at least you know what's going to happen after you after you do that, right? It's going to smell better at least, right? So, those were to me those were the main findings that I think were important to highlight, and just really, again, I mentioned this as a presentation that I do typically as we're traveling around the country to talk to small businesses, and that's really the big thing is like this is why this is important, and I want to make sure that you have some ideas, or at least you can check in on where you are with your marketing now to know that you're actually investing your time in the right things in the right ways. So you're moving forward and then can, again, have something coming to you, right? Building some revenue, doing something. And then that frees you up to feel like you're not spinning your wheels and then spend a little bit more time on some of those other things that people say that, oh, you have to be doing this and you have to be doing that, right? It kind of, you may not need to be doing it, but it allows you to experiment.
That's fantastic. Speaking of experimentation, another report I'm looking at here, Growth in Motion.
Mm.
What experiments are working, maybe not working? What are the trends that are helping drive some of that experiential marketing? I mean, how are small businesses growing right now, given all the challenges they're
Yeah.
facing
Yeah.
in the
Well,
macro?
a little bit of, a little bit of some of the things that we're seeing, like theme wise, right? That we were just talking about in many ways. I think, in that report, we were looking for this growth in motion report. This was looking at businesses, born really within the last 5 years. And so when
Mm,
you consider that are folks that are coming out of the pandemic, right? Where
mm,
they're coming out of less than ideal economic conditions. And so, these are folks that their general sense is, cautiously optimistic, right? They're just being realistic about it, right? They know there's going to be challenges, but they're also excited about that. I mean, I think most anybody, when you take that leap to start your own business, you're feeling pretty excited about it to begin with, right? To do that, and it kind of keeps you going in many ways. But they also recognize that things aren't going to be perfect, and so what we see out of that, of course, is that adaptability, is one of those things that you have to stay nimble because you don't know what's going to be thrown at you. I mean, take from the pandemic to where we are now. Now it's tariffs. Now it's all these other things happening that are going to impact small businesses in many ways, and who knows what tomorrow is going to bring. And so you really do need to be nimble, right? You have to be ready to switch things up and really find those new ways to grow. And so what we also found that folks, marketing is a top priority. Customer acquisition is something that they also find is important to do, and so to help them kind of navigate that, they are actually adapting technology. They're adopting that, right? They're and also embracing AI in a way that I think we haven't seen businesses or older businesses do, right? I think they're moving that way. But they're more open to it now. But they're really embracing that a lot more, and really looking for ways to just streamline what it is that they're doing. And so that really gives them ways to just really improve on what they're doing. And so that's kind of what we're seeing with the businesses that are kind of coming out of that era of the last 5 years.
Marketing is a puzzle. You can either give into the confusion or learn to love the solve. On the Axiom's Real Talk About Marketing podcast, guests like Aaron Schaefer of GM share how to manage challenges.
Make sure that you're not fixed in terms of what you're thinking about. The team's going to change, and the way teams operate are going to change. COVID was a great example of that. The industry is going to change. Are cookies going away or not? That was another great example of that. And so how do you continue to evolve as the space evolves?
Guests from HP, The Trade Desk, and Databricks share thoughts on today's marketing landscape. Find Real Talk About Marketing on YouTube, Axiom.com, or wherever you hear podcasts.
Yeah, it's amazing the shift. It's also being led by Gen Z and millennials
Yeah.
naturally as they are helping drive a revival or energize the small business community. Beyond demographics, what do you think is helping drive that shift? I know when I engage rarely, but occasionally with like a Gen Z or millennial client, I learn more from them. It's a completely different mindset than my Gen X peers. What's your thinking behind that shift?
Yeah, so that was actually something that came as a surprise to us. With our main report that did just released most recently, really highlighted that how there's it's just a blind spot for small businesses. I mean, when you consider the numbers, there are like 33 million plus, small businesses, and that makes up like 99.9% of the businesses in the U.S. Right, and so there's so many around us all the time. We don't really recognize it all the time. And as kind of a byproduct that was in there that didn't actually make that report is that what we were seeing is that both Gen Z and millennials are actually seeking out small businesses. And I think this is a direct, correlation between what's happening in the world, right? I think they want to spend their money and seek out experiences with businesses that really match the values that they share, right? They're looking for people that, they're not going to feel like just a number, to the business. It's not that they're not going to shop at big box stores and those types of things, right? But they are looking to go to those small businesses where there's authenticity there are people that align with their values, and they also appreciate that there's local impact that's happening when they start thinking about those things too. And so it's really interesting, and I think it's exciting when you think about it. I mean, compared to I want to look at some numbers here. So 32% and 28% actually seek out SMBs that offer like unique experiences, which is, that's far above the boomers, right? Which were at 18%. And yeah, I mean, they feel like small businesses have a 31% and 30% of Gen Z. So millennials and Gen Z feel like these small businesses have, a positive impact on their role. And so, and then almost 50% both of Gen Z and millennials as compared to 25% of boomers really seek out small businesses, right? And so it's just that's exciting to see as someone who's supported small businesses for many years and really is rooting for small businesses to succeed and continue to be a driving force in the, I think we're somewhere around 43% of the gross domestic product and all of that. And so it's good to see that, because I think you can think as we start to move and we advance in technology and everything with AI that stuff may go away. But again, I think as we started this conversation, right? I think that's actually going to make those smaller interactions and experiences with people be even more important. And I think that's where I start to think that business owners, particularly small business owners, of course, really need to lean into the things that make them unique, right? That make those connections, share those values. I think showing who you are as people and what you stand for as a business is going to be even more and more important. And I think, Evan, you've been around doing this for a while. In many ways, this feels like not too different, but maybe just people are catching up to the fact that how important this is, because I would argue that this is probably stuff we've been talking about a long time. Lean into those things that make you stand out from the big box stores and build those relationships with people. But I think this is just another proof point that people actually want to spend their dollars and do those types of things.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when I interact with a Gen Z or millennial business owner, and I occasionally give advice, I often give the advice to kind of focus a little more on the basics, the fundamentals. I mean, there's a lot of excitement around creating TikTok content or the
Yeah.
latest Insta Reels, and that's great, necessary. But some of the basics in business are phone calls, email, platforms that their parents are on, maybe more like Facebook or LinkedIn than their peers. And so it's not always about just reinvention. What about you? What do you suggest those younger small business owners focus on to start?
Well, I think the big thing is, regardless of what you're doing or what, a time period we're in, I think it's really focusing on those customer relationships, right? So whatever that means, right? So that might mean, it's Facebook today, right? Tomorrow it will be, XYZ platform, right? It's always going to change. And I think if you understand those ways of communicating and connecting with people, like, I think those fundamentals that make us human, those are the things that are always going to be the same. And so if you can focus on those relationships, I mean, we know this, whether that's in business, whether it's the consumer relationship, whether it's the relationship on the block that you live, right? What you have with your neighbors, those are the things that really make everything run, make everything happen. And I think that's the place to really focus on, right? Like, that's the core of it. And so how can you continually stay top of mind? How can you continually build those relationships? How can you, open up the dialogue with those people that are important to your business? Those are the things that are going to move you forward. I think it's also important to expand beyond just social media. I think, some of the things that we found even in that most recent study is that, a lot of businesses are starting with social. It makes sense, right? It's I'll use free in air quotes, right? It's free in many ways. It's something that a lot of these folks with these new businesses have grown up with, right? Like, they're in it all the time, so they understand it and they know how it works. But I mean, even as we look at things like, what's kind of still going on with TikTok, right? It was banned for a while. It's back. We don't really know what's going to be the final outcome for that. Or, if Facebook goes down, everything, algorithms change, all that. I think it's really important to understand that if you're relying solely on that, you're kind of putting everything into rented land, right? Like somebody else owns the controls to that castle, or has the keys to that castle, right? And so you have to not just rely on that, use it. It's a valuable tool. It's important to engage and reach new people and raise awareness, but make sure that you are doing those things to move people closer to your business, right? Moving into email, as you mentioned, right? SMS is another way. Those are all, that changes the dynamic a bit, because now you have a way to directly connect with and influence whether or not your customer knows about you, comes back to you, and again, strengthening those relationships on your terms, because you own that contact now, right? And I think also another thing that I saw the other day, you hear that term, or you hear that phrase, the money is in the list, and I was like, oh yeah, I should have thought of that, or that should have came to me immediately. Was, in addition to that, when you start thinking about, if you're building a business, that's also a very valuable asset if you have a list of people that you own, right? Because that becomes an asset to the business as well, and something that adds value as you're thinking about maybe in the future getting out of your business and selling the business, right? If you're, all things being equal, you have a business that has a list of buyers that come along with it versus those that don't, or you don't have this other big audience, right? Just think about this. This is where people are spending their dollars too, from an advertising perspective, right? Like, it's always about getting in front of eyeballs. And if you have those eyeballs built into your business already, that's a value add that you can add as you start to think about, moving beyond just what you're doing today. And I think the last piece is just really, really leveraging the technology. And this could be simple things, right? This could just mean, using what's in your platform, right? I think of Constant Contact specifically. There are also tools beyond just email, right? You can manage your social media, you can manage events from there, you can do SMS, right? You can do all of these things, and then again, leverage the technology to save you time. Connect with the other tools that you're using. If you're a Canva user, for example, or you're using Shopify, making those connections through the integrations that we have, regardless if you're using us or somebody else, but whatever the case may be, connecting those tools allows you to save yourself time. I always give the example of, when you think of Canva, for example, right? What's the typical workflow? You go to Canva, you create an image, you download it to computer, then you go to your email, and then you upload that to your email library, and then you add it to the email. Whereas if you just make the connection, now all of your pictures are there, right? And then you're just adding it to the email versus doing the download and upload and all that kind of stuff. Similar with Shopify. If you're connecting your Shopify account through that integration, right now you've got all the work you've already done on your website to add your products, your images, and all that stuff. You've got that within your account, and then it's just dragging the product that you want in, and then you can make adjustments. But it's got all that information that you've already done, so you're saving yourself that doing that double work, right? That you might not do. And I think those are the big things. Focusing on the relationships, expanding beyond just social media, and then really just leveraging the technology that's available to you today.
Such a great point, and it's almost a reminder to myself how important I'll call it CRM. It's really my contact list, my email list, that is to my business. I mean, it's pure gold. It can't be taken away. It can't be demonetized like every social media channel.
Yeah.
And if it's curated and managed properly on a platform like Constant Contact or others, I mean, I get 50% open rates because it's highly targeted. It's the messaging is very clear. My audience knows it's from me, and you can't get that on social media anywhere. So it's really fundamental to my business. But just let's take one takeaway as we look to the rest of the year. Can't believe it's June. We're almost
I know, right?
halfway through the year. Is there one trend that you're excited about for the SMB world? And I'll start. One is text to video. The idea of AI avatars or virtual influencers. It's incredible what's being done for a couple $100. You can create a video or an avatar or an influencer video that would have taken thousands of dollars, if at all, to create just a couple years ago. It's going to be amazing for small business owners, that not just the incredible tech, but the cost. The cost is going to be just a fraction of what it used to be. But what are you looking forward to the rest of the year?
Yeah, well, for me, it always comes down to the fundamentals, right? I think the biggest thing for me is customer relationships, as always. But beyond that, I think I'm excited for the idea that, like, look, I look at some of the things we're doing at Constant Contact in terms of just, we call it like campaign builder, where AI can come in and you can let it know, okay, here's what I'm trying to do. I have a sale this weekend or something's going on. You can plug that information in, and then it will create a multi-channel campaign for you, right? So it'll think across social posts. It'll think about what the emails need to be. It'll think about, do you need an event? Do you need to do something like that? SMS, right? And it will give you the structure and the timings and the number of messages that you should think about. And so I think of that as like, look, that's work you're going to have to do. And that, again, right, you procrastinate on the marketing. We've seen the numbers there because you have so much stuff to do. This gives you such a leg up to be able to have something to react to, that you may even be able to just say, yeah, that's good to go, right? But if not, you got to go in and make adjustments. But at least you have the bones of something that gives you a chance to do the things that you need to do, and not just a one and done way, right? And so it thinks about that holistically to getting you to reach your goal. And I think things like that are really exciting, because I think it's exciting when you can use these tools to do the things you may not want to do, but help you so that you can go and do those things that you do need to do, which I think, as we kind of started this conversation, is really going to be those experiences with people. I think those are going to become more and more important, which again leads me to my idea of customer relationships, right? And so I think that's the big thing that we really just need to stay focused on.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for joining and catching up and sharing your outlook. Always fascinating. I learn a lot. And here's to an amazing summer in New England. It's our time to thrive. Thanks, Steve.
Woohoo, Evan. Great to see you as always. And hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for listening, watching, and sharing, and checking out the new TV show at techimpact.tv on Bloomberg and Fox Business. Thanks, everyone.